Uh, Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Welcome everyone. I'd like to first of all congratulate the Kaya Natin team and Mr. Harvey K and the Kaya Natin team for bringing this together. We'd like to thank you, Kaya Natin. This is a very powerful conversation in trying to discover the struggles and the gains of how business cope with the crisis and how business can develop a role in the COVID crisis. Before we start, maybe we can talk about what is happening right now in terms of how the unemployment and the economy is to be able to frame the conversation. Camille, can we show the framing slides? Sige. As we start off the COVID crisis last March 15, the state of the economy was actually improving. By the end of the fourth quarter, if you look at the figure at the bottom, SWS was indicating that hunger was going down. It used to be 9%, it was going down to 8%. In spite of the fact that globally, our hunger was hovering at the serious level, it has been like that for a number of years and it's gradually going down. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, from May 14 alone, on that quarter, hunger doubled immediately. And the same figure by July rose up to 20%. In comparison, sometime in March last year, nasa 9.5% ang hunger indication ng ating bansa. Why are we talking about hunger? Hunger it may not be a direct economic indicator, but it can be a leading indicator on how the economy will look like in the coming months because of unemployment and also because of the deep need. Can we continue? That's a in a survey by a CSO collab alone in Quezon City, the hunger in Quezon City was as much as 38%. That's of the experience almost moderate to severe hunger. And 76% lost their income during the ECQ. The 76%, from what another survey is coming up, even after the ECQ, only improved a little bit because of the huge unemployment that the country is going through right now. Sige, next slide, please. Sometime in June, the jobless survey reached from the PSA reached 7.3 million in April, as reported in June. And then, sige, next slide. And then the GDP slowed down from 5.4% in quarter 2 2019 to negative figures of 16.5%. So talagang compress yung ating GDP. Next slide, please. And then the jobless for 40, there was a social weather indicator uh, figure that says 45% of adult population are jobless. Okay. With this kind of figure, we can render a picture of a difficult times for the country. Next. Siguro what we want to ask our panelists today would be, how does the business sector adjust to the new normal? How do we how do we solve the unemployment, and what can business do? How can the businesses contribute in spite of the conditions that they're going through, the struggles that they have, also in the COVID situation? Our panelists right now are made up of civic society leaders, government leaders, and business leaders in the country. They are also the leaders of the Kaya Natin movement for good governance and have been working with other leaders in the country and having critical conversations about this. No, siguro we'll just go through it. Our first panelist who may share his insights is Mr. Harvey K. Harvey K is a Malabon community business head and vice president of McBride Pet Corporation, PET, one of the country's leading manufacturers in PET bottling. He was an inaugural fellow of the Asian Institute of Management's Steam Energy Center for Bridging Societal Divides. In 2006, he was chosen by the Asia Society, an international organization based in New York, as one of the young leaders of Asia through its Asia 21 Young Leaders Program. He was awarded one of the 2010 the Outstanding Young Men, TOYM, no, of the Philippines in the fields of education, good governance, and also one of the awardees of the DevEx Manila 40 Under 40 International Development Leaders in 2013. And now, let's invite Mr. Harvey K to share his insights in how business can be a part of this crisis. Mr. K, Harvey?
Thank you, Jess, for that. I'd like to, of course, thank Jess for agreeing to be our facilitator for this afternoon. To my co-panelists, Senator Bam Aquino and Attorney Charlie Yu, to all those who are watching this webinar on the role of business in addressing this pandemic, a pleasant afternoon to all of you. My experience would be more based on a business owner perspective and also as a vice president of the City of Malabon Business Association and what we are all experiencing right now as entrepreneurs and as business owners in light of the present COVID-19 pandemic. First slide, please. I think yung unang role ng business is we have to survive and thrive. No? If we want to talk about what the role of business is in this pandemic, the first thing that the business has to do is to be able to survive. We can't even have this talk if the business that you are running will not be able to survive this. Why is it important to survive this? Because not only for your own business, but for the sake of your employees. And I think that one of the key learnings in this pandemic is that agility is very important. The ability to be able to adjust on the fly. No one predicted that there would be a pandemic of this magnitude when 2020 came in. We all thought that it would probably end by June or May, but it has been prevalent and it's still growing right now. No? Companies who will be able to adjust to the new normal will be able to weather the storm. One of the things that we did in our company was now to invest heavily on digital marketing, primarily because many of the people have now decided to work from home, and many of them are now active in the internet because of that work from home program. So much of our marketing has been shifted now to digital. No? So we have gone into that phase right now. At the same time, agility is key because we have to know also the current market trends. One of the things that we've realized is that many have established their own small businesses, small home-based businesses. And that's the reason why you have a lot of these small businesses requesting us for packaging, requesting us for customized bottles. So we are trying to adjust to that as well, because whereas before, much of our clientele has really been focused on big corporations and big accounts. Now you can see that there are more home-based businesses that are being established. Also partly because many have stayed home and many have actually lost employment. So you now see them establishing their own small businesses. At the same time, it's very important that businesses survive, so that you will be able to provide employment and income to your employees. I've always said that you have to start, charity begins at home. You cannot do CSR work unless you take care of your own employees. And that's very important for us at McBride. Mahalaga na sa amin na nung umpisa pa lang ng pandemic, one of the marching orders that I already told the management team, our management team, was very simple. We just want to survive this year without retrenching people. One of the key things that we wanted to do was to ensure that even if we are not able to anymore hit our sales target or even our income targets this year, as long as we're able to just break even and survive this pandemic, then we would already consider 2020 as a victory. The most important thing for us right now is to continue to provide employment. One less unemployed person is one less hungry family for us at McBride. Next slide, please. As I said, no, we start in your own backyard. We've always emphasized persons over profit. Next. We wanted to also stress this, no? We wanted to stress that for us at McBride, we put employee safety and welfare above everything. No? I think we were one of the first companies to actually require our workers to wear not only face masks but also face shields early on in the pandemic. As early as I think the last week of March to early April, when the government allowed essential manufacturing industries to operate at 50% capacity, we already ensured that all of our employees were provided the necessary PPEs. At the same time, we moved during the course of the ECQ and MECQ to ensure that only less than 50% of our office-based employees would go to the office. We went as low as around 10 to 15% only of people coming into our offices and ensured that majority of our office-based employees would be working from home. This also ensured that our employees would be safe. We also ensured that our employees that did not have their own means of transportation would be provided shuttle services, so to ensure that they do not need anymore to commute or to walk several kilometers just to be able to go to work. So that's one of the things that we emphasized. It's okay that we spend more as long as our employees are safe, as long as our employees are doing well and are healthy and strong. So one of the things that we emphasize at McBride is employee welfare. At the same time, we early on in the pandemic, we already created our own safety and health protocols. We based it on research done not only through the DOH or DTI specifications, but we also looked at studies being done abroad. For example, we wanted to already ensure that even if there were no studies that said that COVID-19 was airborne, we wanted to already ensure that proper ventilation was given to all our offices and all our factories. We didn't want to take risks with regard to that. So we also educated our employees that it's also important that even if wearing face masks and face shields was very uncomfortable, we had to require them to wear that. And also, we had specific mandates to all of our delivery drivers, for example, that they should never talk to people who do not wear face masks, because it's very important that they continue to be healthy and strong. We also established our own COVID-19 incentive program, wherein factories and offices of McBride who did not do not have any case of COVID-19 for that particular month would receive a particular incentive. This allowed us to be able to help create a more collective effort from our factories and offices para magtulong-tulungan sila, para magbantayan sila. That's something that we feel is very important. COVID-19 is something that has to be a shared responsibility, not just by the management, but by everyone in the company. So we wanted to make sure that everyone is involved in fighting this pandemic right now. And then aside from this, we also provided the vitamins and sacks of rice to our employees, especially during the ECQ, the first month of the ECQ, wherein many of our employees could not go to work. We provided them with rice to ensure that, to also show them that in these very difficult times, the company would try its very best to help them. And then finally, although this is no longer recommended, because of the recommendation of Project ARC, we also conducted rapid tests to all our employees. So company paid for that. It's not something that we ask the employees to pay. We pay for the rapid tests of our employees to also help them, give them some peace of mind. However, as the DOH released new regulations, this is something that we have to reconsider now, given that the DOH has stressed that rapid tests may not be reliable in terms of determining who has and who doesn't have COVID-19. Next. We also believe that a healthy community will lead to a healthy company. So aside from looking at programs within our company, we also work with the Malabon local government unit led by Mayor Lenlen Oreta. Since our business is based in Malabon, we provided educational materials on COVID-19. So these educational materials, an example of which is on the screen, we provided tarpaulins that can be posted by the LGU in different barangays to remind people to wear face masks, especially when they go out. Aside from this, through Kaya Natin's help, we were also able to come out with posters that was given to each family in Malabon, wherein the poster contained advice on how one can prevent COVID-19 from spreading. So this was an education campaign that we did with the City of Malabon Business Association and also the local government of Malabon led by Mayor Oreta. We also donated food and hygiene packs for quarantine centers in Malabon. And we also provided washable face masks for communities in Malabon. So we believe that because COVID-19 is something that is spreading within communities, if we want to stop the spread of COVID-19 and help our business, there is an impetus for us to also help our community, particularly Malabon, to be able to stop the spread of the virus. We feel that by helping our community and creating a healthy community, it will lead to better outcomes in terms of our business. It will lead to a healthier company. It will help to healthier employees because many of our employees are also in Malabon. So those are the initiatives that we've taken in our own business at McBride and as a member of the City of Malabon Business Association. So thank you, Jess, for the time. And thank you as well for organizing this event.
Thank you very much, Harvey. Ang ganda ng sharing ng ating unang panelist. In our first panelist, we have the shared responsibility and the community participation of McBride. Our second resource person and panelist is a former senator of the Philippines. Senator Bam Aquino is a deputy minority leader of the Senate of the Philippines. He chaired various Senate committees and has authored and sponsored several landmark laws, including the Philippine Competition Act, the Free Access to Internet in Public Spaces Act, and the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, in which made college in all state university free for millions of Filipino students. Aquino was also the founder and president of Microventures Inc., a social enterprise that seeks to eliminate poverty through microenterprise and new business development through its flagship program, Happy Noy. Senator Bam, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you, Jess, Harvey, Charlie, at syempre sa lahat po ng mga participants ngayong araw na ito, magandang hapon. Dito po sa amin, napakalakas ng ulan at kumukulog. Kaya kung mawala po yung internet namin, hindi po ako nag-log out. Nilag out po tayo ng ulan at ng kidlat. So I was asked today to give a short talk regarding how we can help our MSMEs, how we can help our businesses thrive, no? But before that, let me just say that itong problema po natin ngayon, ang punot dulo po niyan ay isang health issue, no? As soon as ma-resolve natin yung health issue na ito, business will get back. It might take some time, but business will get back as soon as we're able to address the health concerns in our country. Now, ibang usapan po kasi back in March, kung saan marami sa mga bansa, patas-patas yung pinanggagalingan. After 5 months, magsi 6 months na, makikita ho natin there are initiatives from different parts of the world which have been successful. Unfortunately, sa atin po, hindi pa po natin nakikita yung ganong klaseng success, no, where they hit very high rates of cases and then they were able to bring it down. Some of these countries, unfortunately, tumaas ulit or nagkaroon ng outbreak ulit. Sa atin po, hinahanap pa natin yan. But definitely, at this point, I think we can safely say that it is possible. It is possible for a country to be able to bring their cases down with initiatives that are not secret, they're not rocket science, ginagawa na rin po ng ibang mga bansa. Kailangan lang talaga ng magandang plano, implementation, constant communication with the private sector and with the public to be able to resolve this issue. So let me start with that, no? Because sometimes nakakalimutan ho natin na ang lahat ng ito ay dahil sa isang pandemya. At kung ma-resolve ho natin yan or mabigyan natin ng mga solusyon yan, these problems that our countrymen are facing in terms of unemployment and which businesses are facing will also lessen. No? So what are 5 ways that we can help our Filipino SMEs? No? And let me start with the big one. No? And that is, of course, we need to optimize our financial support for our SMEs. A lot of countries, if you look at the cornerstone of their relief efforts, it's direct cash transfers to individuals and a correspondingly huge amount of support for their businesses. In our country, karamihan po ng mga business ay small and medium enterprise. And probably, if you look at our current state now, yung SMEs po talaga, yung talagang natatamaan. A number of groups I'm part of ng mga SMEs po sila. Ang term ho nila, dumudugo. Dumudugo yung ating SMEs at nahihirapan po talaga sila. So we need to support them. Now, other countries have come up not just with loans, but with loans, probably even guarantees that fit the type of situation that we have now. If we gave a loan where you're supposed to pay part of the principal and the interest within a month's time, hindi po yan yung akmang klase ng tulong na hinahanap ng ating SMEs. No? Some of the countries in our neighborhood or in the West have actually come out with loans with a 1-year moratorium on interest or a 1-year moratorium on principal or guaranteed yung first year of payments ng mga kumpanya, ng mga SMEs. And this is something we need to really explore. I know that Congress has been asking a number of businessmen, SME groups, no, including the Go Negosyo Group, to be able to advise them on what the best packages are for our SMEs. So yung kailangan po talaga natin ngayon, tulong sa ating SMEs na magkaroon ng konting breathing space, no? Because every day is a struggle for our SMEs. Every day, they're experiencing times na zero ang kanilang revenue. Pag nagla-lockdown and you're not in one of the businesses that are allowed to operate, in a MECQ or ECQ, you have zero revenue. And yet, all of your expenses are still ongoing. No? I know that a lot of bigger companies have started to adjust to the mall owners, have started to adjust rates, for example. At kailangan ho natin yan. No? And later, I'll get into that, yung tinatawag nating inclusive supply chain. But for a lot of our SMEs, they need that infusion now. They need that support now, and they need to be able to have that breathing space so that for the next couple of months, if not year, meron silang opportunity to remain open. No? Harvey, I think, hit the nail on the head. No? Sabi niya, for the business owners, probably yung pinaka-goal, hindi na kumita. Baka yung goal, mag-break even na lang at sana walang mawalan ng trabaho sa ating mga kumpanya. We're already at that point that many of our business owners are already looking at that, no? But what if your business itself is closed? What if you're in the entertainment or tourism industry? What if you're in an industry that is really having trouble right now or has no way to reopen? What are you supposed to do, no? I was talking to some of my friends na mga negosyante at sabi nga nila, alam mo Bam, kung may tulong sa amin, we will remain open. We will do our best to remain. Kahit umutang pa kami, kahit alam naming lugi, kahit alam naming hindi kami kikita like before. Kung yung lugi kaya naming matawid, basta bukas kami, open kami, yun yung aming goal, to be able to survive this pandemic and come out and fight again later on, 6 months or a year from now, come out of it alive and be able to continue the fight. For many of these companies, you have to understand, to break even might mean to close down. No? Baka ang pinakamadaling paraan para hindi sila malugi ay magsara na muna. But for all of the business owners I spoke to, wala po sa kanila ang gusto magsara. They want to remain open. They want to keep their employees because they know that this pandemic is not forever. May hangganan po ito. But they need the support to be able to be open for that finite period na yung revenue po ay talagang delikado. Second point. Yes, next slide please. The second point is an inclusive supply chain, and this is something that we've been talking about for a long time. Pero it takes on a different importance now that we are in this crisis, no. Ang ibig sabihin po ng inclusive supply chain is if you're a market leader, if you're a bigger business, as much as possible, you make sure that there are more Filipino businesses, much smaller than you, in your supply chain. No? One of the best examples of this, no, in the past years was Jollibee and the Kalasan farmers of Nueva Ecija, from which Jess Lorenzo is from, di ba? So that's a very famous story of how Jollibee made the decision, difficult when they made the decision, to buy onions from farmers' cooperatives directly instead of importing it from abroad. They did not buy at higher than market rate, no? Pareho yung presyo, markado pa rin. But they worked with the cooperative to be able to get them to a level where they could be part of the supply chain of one of the biggest companies in the Philippines. So we've been pushing for this. In fact, even our Board of Investment has incentives for inclusive businesses. No? This was already signed a few years back. Kung meron kang Board of Investment benefit, if you can prove your inclusivity, and there are factors for it, no, they will give you more years of the benefit that the Board of Investment is able to provide. So in one form or the other, meron na po ito sa ating government mandate, no, in one form or the other. But now, I think the imperative is that businesses really take a hard look, and I'm talking about the big businesses here. They have to take a hard look at their own supply chain and see how they can leverage their supply chain to support smaller businesses. It sounds easy, but it's not that easy, especially if you're a huge company with very professional and strict processes. To create space for your SMEs is not easy. Hindi ho madali yan. But this is one of those times na kailangan ho natin gawin yan because we need to leverage the stability of larger companies and allow that stability to permeate into smaller companies. No? What do I mean? For example, if you are a manufacturer and part of your supply chain you can get through smaller companies that are based here, if you include them in your supply chain, yung value that you create is now shared with another company that without you might have to deal with retail directly or might have to deal with other companies who might really just squeeze them out. So mahalaga po itong inclusive supply chain, and this is one of those things that businesses need to do. In fact, a lot of companies have done a number of charity programs which are very important. No? Kailangan po yan during times of crisis. But they need to also create other groups within their main business line to see how their operations can be utilized and leveraged better to support our other SMEs. In some ways, parang bagong bayanihan spirit po ito eh. Remember, we look at bayanihan as a form of individuals coming together to do something that they couldn't do together. No? Hindi naman mabubuhat ng isang Pilipino, ng isang tao ang bahay kubo at ililipat dun sa lugar na mas ligtas. In the same way, you can look at this as a business bayanihan type, where a company who has more stability, where a company who is able to has a better chance of surviving this pandemic, opens its doors, opens its supply chain, shares the value that it can create with fellow Filipino companies, and then support those companies to be able to get to a level where they can integrate into the business processes of our larger companies. This is another, I think, very important part that not enough people are talking about. And if we had more cooperation among business groups, especially from the larger ones to the medium to the small, we'll be able to share the stability and share the strength of the larger Filipino companies that they currently have right now. Third, ito naman simple lang, no, buy local. And this becomes really kumbaga dumudoble po yung importance nito, no. The buy local campaign has been here for decades, no. Matagal na po 'yan. But now that we're looking at companies at the brink of closing down, people losing their jobs, no, especially the employees from SMEs, supporting our local companies becomes doubly important, triply important, no. Wala ho atang isang linggo sa aming bahay na wala kaming na-order mula sa mga nakikita ng asawa ko sa Instagram. Sa totoo lang po. But yes, ito na yung date namin. This is date night, no, for us, no, pag nakaka-order kami ng kakaibang pagkain. But apart from that, we know that by supporting Filipino companies, by supporting your SMEs, buying local, supporting their businesses, you're doing double effort in terms of helping our countrymen. A lot of Filipinos had to pivot, no? A lot of our countrymen had to pivot. And many of them who were in industries that are now practically closed down or who have very little economic activity, they had to pivot and they had to do different things. And now is the time for those of us who have the capacity to engage with them, to buy things from them, to support them. Now is the time to seek out your friends, your colleagues who have pivoted their businesses or who are now SMEs and support them with buying their products and buying their services properly. Fourth, hindi madali ang digital transformation, and this is something I think that we take for granted, no? Marami nagsabi in the beginning, oh, ano na, yung lumang negosyo mo, i-digitalize mo na. Hindi ho ganun kadali yun, no? That requires hardware, software, capacity building. It requires another way of doing things. Hindi ho siya ganun kadali. For some of us, it's easy because, you know, maybe marunong talaga tayo dyan o baka meron po talagang... Yes, am I still there? Jess, can you hear me?
Yes, we can go ahead. Continue.
Okay, there was a message na nawala po ako eh. So
you're here. We can hear you.
So hindi ho ganun kadali yan. And this is something I think that government can do also. Or even big business groups or big private sector groups. We need to be able to fund the digital transformation of traditional businesses which do not have economic activity now. Now, one example, of course, was the OVP's program to bring your produce straight to consumer. No, marami ho tayo nakikitang ganito, but kulang pa yan. Kulang pa yan. And those companies that want to do this need to be supported to do it. So doblehin na natin, hindi lang yung digital transformation, pati yung pivot. We need to find ways to support groups, companies who want to pivot. Because if you are currently in this business climate at gusto mo pa ring lumaban, no? Gusto mo pa ring lumaban, kailangan masuportahan ka. And I think if you look at all of these different tips or different points that we're trying to present, yun naman yung underlying dun eh. Para sa mga kababayan natin na gusto pang lumaban, because, you know, even if it's hard, they don't want to close shop. They want to continue their business, or they want to shift their business. They want to digitally transform their business, or they want to engage in larger markets. We need to support them further. Hindi ho to bago, matagal na ho nating sinasabi to, but now more than ever, nasa crisis time na tayo. If we're able to support the pivot of companies, even the pivot of individuals, no? there's a favorite story of mine that one of my wife's friends who's a choreographer, because wala nang events, no? Wala na pong negosyo yung mga gumagawa ng mga events. He now sells chicken inasal, no? And there was one time we were having lunch at sabi ko, napakasarap naman ng chicken inasal na to. Saan ba galing to? And I was surprised to find out that it came from my wife's choreographer friend. Hindi po siya chef, choreographer po siya, no? So he gusto niyang lumaban. He wants to be able to engage in the market. Supportahan natin siya. What support can we provide him in this effort to continue engaging in the market? So whether it's including you in a more formal supply chain, giving you support so that your business can be alive for the next 6 months so you won't have to lay off people or close your operations, support a digital transformation because in the next 6 to 8 months, this is the name of the game, or even allow you to pivot, no? Kahit ibang-iba pa yung negosyo mo, basta gusto mo pa rin lumaban, kailangan mo ng suporta. And again, this is a new type of bayanihan, no? We're used to bayanihan maybe in the individual sense or even in a political sense, but in a business sense, now more than ever, kailangan magtulong-tulungan ang mga related industries. Magtulong-tulungan ang gobyerno at ang private sector to be able to create that clear path to break even or even to prosperity during these difficult times. So these are 4 points. The last point, I think, is something that everyone here, the fact na nandito po kayo sa seminar na ito means alam niyo to. We have to recognize the importance of SMEs, which is simply our country is an SME country, no? 99% ng mga negosyo po sa Pilipinas, micro, small, medium. Micro, small, medium. Which means 99.6% of businesses in the Philippines are at risk. Kasi kahit po ang mga medium-sized companies now are at risk. So the effort needs to be here. Yes, I agree. There should be effort in terms of dole out, charity, support for our countrymen who are hungry. Hindi ho pwedeng mawala yan. Pero kailangan rin ng kaakibat na suporta para sa mga negosyo because businesses, by their nature, create value. So yung pisong ipapasok mo sa isang negosyo, posibleng maging 2 piso yan, posibleng maging 10 piso yan. So the mere fact that companies create value, they multiply value, we need to be able to pump prime our MSMEs to ensure that the economy is ongoing and to ensure that our countrymen have jobs. Now, can you imagine? Kung nangyayari na po ito, sunod-sunod na po yung mga nalilay off. Earlier, Jess shared the SWS number on self-rated unemployment. No? I'm guessing yung number po na yan includes our workers na nag-flexible work arrangement. Because a number of our workers may not formally be unemployed, but they are receiving much less than what they used to receive. No? So, posible na kasama na rin dyan. Kasama na rin dyan yung mga flexible work arrangement who are receiving 20 to 30% of what they used to receive, no? So, mahalaga po na masuportahan sila directly, pero mahalaga rin na matulungan yung ating MSMEs, no? At the end of the day, 66% of jobs come from this sector. Oh, ngayon 61%. That used to be 66% come from this sector. So, if we want to keep people employed, if we want to keep people there, we need to help our businesses stay alive a little bit longer. Ayun ho yung imperative. At wala na hong paligoy-ligoy dito. We need to support them so that our countrymen will have the employment that they need because once mag-spiral po, ang ekonomiya po yan, ano po yan domino po yan, sunod-sunod po yan. Once mag-spiral down tayo, mas mahirap makabangon. So if we are, and they are deliberating the stimulus package now, sana po, at alam naman po ito ng IATF, alam naman po ito ng DTI, sana po there is a healthy support, a support for our businesses to survive the next couple of months, if not year. Sana sa susunod na po yung mga babayaran mga debts, no? Oops. Sana po sa susunod na yung mga babayaran ng mga utang. And at the end of the day, be able to support our businesses because it is businesses that provide jobs for our countrymen. Government should unlock these doors, should make it easy, should provide the support, but at the end of the day, yung mga negosyo po yung nag-e-employ ng ating taong bayan. Now, let me end with saying that oftentimes, we attend a seminar on health and the discussion becomes very health-focused na, health, kahit magsara yung mga kumpanya, basta may basta ligtas yung mga tao sa COVID, no? Or sometimes we attend a business forum and the conclusion then becomes we have to open up and learn to live with this disease, no? And all of that. And it drives us to a false dichotomy, no? It is a false choice. Hindi ho totoo na kailangan piliin ekonomiya o kalusugan. Hindi po siya totoo because we need both. We need to do better in both aspects. Hindi ho pwede na napakaganda nga, nag-zero cases tayo pero lahat ng negosyo bagsak. Hindi na naman ho pwede na lahat ng mga negosyo ongoing pero napakataas naman ng ating cases at napakaraming Pilipino ang mahahawa. We need to excel in both. And what we need to understand is kaya naman ho ito. Since kaya natin event po ito, we need to accept and we need to realize na kaya po natin to. Much like other countries have done, kaya ho natin to. We just need to do better in so many different things and use our resources well such that yung tulong ho talagang mapupunta sa mga tao at mga grupo or organisasyon or entities that can use the support, multiply it further, and be able to distribute that. In my time ho in public service, we've always said inclusive growth is the key. No? Kung may kasaganaan po ang Pilipinas, kailangan po nababahagi ito sa mas maraming Pilipino. That has always been the core of our legislation, the core of our programs, the core of our leadership. Ngayon, growth, napakahirap pong isipin kasi everyone is just trying to survive. Siguro po, ang ibig sabihin ng inclusive growth ngayon, kung tayo po makakasurvive ng pandemya, dapat lahat tayo makakasurvive. Hindi lang iilang sektor sa ating bayan. Dapat pati yung pinakamahihirap, yung nasa laylayan, yung pinaka-vulnerable, dapat po lahat tayo, tinatrabaho po natin na makalampas at makatawid po tayo sa pandemyang ito. Thank you very much po. Salamat.
Thank you very much, Senator Bam, for that very inspiring sharing. So far, we've had two powerful sharers from Mr. Harvey K. He exemplified the business practice and how good business practices must start from the family or from the inside, and how they are also extending help. They have launched their COVID incentive programs that's very notable. That can be a good example as well. From our second resource person, Senator Bam, he powerfully expressed how a strong and balanced support and a 5-point agenda for survival even and recovery for SMEs. And hinighlight din po niya kung gaano kalaki ang kinocontribute ng SME sa ating ekonomiya, pati na rin sa trabaho. Yung ating third speaker is one of the captains of the industry. Attorney Anthony Charlemagne Yu is a businessman who has been at the helm of several companies. Currently, Attorney Yu holds the position of President and Chief Executive Officer of Empire East Holdings, Chairman and President of Empire East Communities Incorporated, and Chairman and President of Laguna Bel Air School Incorporated. Wow, malapit lang sa amin to. Aside from these, he is also active in NGO work since his college years. He serves as the chairman of ERDA Group of Foundations, a trustee of Cullion Foundation, Inc., and president of El Nido Foundation. He was also a professor at the University of the Philippines College of Law and a member college faculty at the University of Ateneo de Manila. Attorney Charlemagne Yu is one of the board of the Kaya Natin Movement for Good Governance. Together with Senator Bam and Mr. Harvey K, they provide sanctuary for leaders who practice good governance and ethical leadership. Attorney Yu.
Thank you very much, Jess. Hi, Bam. Hi, Harvey. Hi to all the viewers. Many times when we have discussions like this, we assume that we are all on the same page. More often than not, we have different starting points, which is why it is important for us to have some sort of leveling off. And because I need to do that first, I may go a little longer. Please bear with me as I try to lay the predicate or lay the foundation for the topic under discussion. And to do that, allow me to introduce or reintroduce two very simple concepts. The first concept, is the cash-to-cash cycle. Again, as we said, just for leveling of purposes, allow me to present this very simple chart, which I call the cash-to-cash cycle, or what is often called the cash conversion cycle. It is something we all know, but it is good to remind ourselves about it from time to time. Here's how the cycle works. You want to go into business, first you have cash. And then that's box number 1. You'll see that there are 6 boxes here. The next step of the cycle occurs when you hire employees and your employees spend time producing goods or providing services. If you're a manufacturer, you also order materials and spend money converting those raw materials into finished goods. At this point, since you contracted workers and ordered materials, you owe salaries to your staff and you owe money to your suppliers for the materials you purchase. In other words, you have something that you need to pay. These are the accounts payable, which is box number 3. And then you go to the point where you have to pay your employees and your suppliers. You have to pay cash. So we have finished part of the cycle, which is the cash out cycle. We now turn to the part where the cash flows back to business. Once you have the goods or the service, you need to sell your products. You need to sell your services. Once you make a sale, what happens? The buyer owes you money. So you will receive something from the buyer. You call that receivables, account receivables. You collect these receivables and then you get your cash back, which may include your profit. And now we're back to box number 1. And the cycle begins again. If you plow back the money into the cycle or even expand the business by including your profit in the cash that you plow back into business, or you can even take out a loan and bring more money into the business. It is very important for us to understand this cash-to-cash cycle in order for us to appreciate the gravity of the COVID crisis. The next concept, environment affecting strategy. Business organizations, all business organizations use strategy to integrate what? Their functions and activities within itself, internal integration, and to integrate the business with the external environment, the external integration. So you have strategy for internal integration and strategy for external integration. The problem is that the external condition or the environment constantly changes, and the business has little control over these changes. Therefore, strategy and structure must be flexible to adapt to the changes in the environment. In order for us to know what is the appropriate strategic response to changes in the environment, business leaders must be able to understand the impact of these changes. There are basically 4 components that describe the nature of change in the environment. 1, stability. 2nd, complexity. 3rd, resource scarcity. 4th, uncertainty. Let me go through it very quickly one by one. Stability. When we speak of stability, we refer to the rate at which change occurs. In a stable environment, change is slow. Managers, business leaders have time to monitor. They have time to respond to changes in a manner that's very deliberate. There are industries that are very stable. Example, the sari-sari store industry, the grocery industry. On the other hand, a dynamic environment is one where change is rapid. Managers must quickly respond, and organizations must be flexible in order to respond to the changes. In today's environment, generally it is a very dynamic environment. Why? Because of technological changes, because of shifting consumer tastes, because of many amendments in laws and regulations. The political landscape keeps changing, and the international conditions. They are all changing very rapidly and very dramatically. And failure to monitor or to respond to changing conditions often result to the demise of the company. Very clear example would be handheld phones. Remember how Motorola used to dominate the cell phone industry. Today, does anyone here carry a Motorola amongst us? I doubt it. Then this was followed by Nokia. They were both market leaders. Nokia in particular did not respond quickly to the emergence of smartphones. In 2014, Microsoft bought the mobile business of Nokia. Another example, Kodak. Those who are 40 years and above in this audience, you know what Kodak is. Those who are in their 20s and probably early 30s probably do not know what Kodak is. Kodak is a technology company that dominated the photographic film market during most of the 20th century. The company blew its chance to lead the digital photography revolution as they were in denial for too long. Steve Sasson is a Kodak engineer. He was actually the one who invented the first digital camera back in 1975. But it was a filmless photography. So when he presented it to the management of Kodak, the reaction was, oh, that's nice, that's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. So Kodak developed the world's first consumer digital camera, but they could not get the approval of management to launch it or to sell it because of the fear of the effects on the film market. The leaders of Kodak failed to see that digital photography as a disruptive technology could propel them to further to the top of the next wave. The management was so focused in their success in the film that they missed the digital revolution after starting it. Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012. The Kodak failure surprised a lot of people. So that's stability, the rate of change. Second nature of change in the environment is complexity. When we speak of complexity, we refer to the number of elements in the organization that have all the connections. In a highly complex environment, there are many variables that can affect the company. The variables are very hard to identify and measure, and they are connected in such a way that sometimes it's very difficult to comprehend them. What is the role of managers and business leaders? They must monitor and respond to all these sources of change in order to make decisions. Because small changes in one factor can produce major change in another factor. Give you an example. GM. GM, General Motors, is a global auto manufacturer. It did not anticipate an increase in the default rates on the US home mortgages would begin a series of financial crises that would eventually lead to its bankruptcy. Another example that did not see the complexity of the environment, Pan American World Airways, or Pan Am. Pan Am was an airline that was known as a brand ahead of its time. The airline became a major company credited with so many innovations, such as jet aircraft, jumbo jets, and many others that shaped the airline industry. The company was a cultural icon of the 20th century. The slogan of Pan Am, the world's most experienced airline, which was later used against them. Why? Because of a series of tragic accidents and terrorist attacks, Pan Am suffered a reputational setback that they could not recover from. Trust was completely lost from its customers, and Pan Am was associated to being the unsafe choice of airlines. And people were saying, oh, that's why they're the world's most experienced airline. Why? Because they have the most tragic accidents and terrorist attacks. They had a lot of innovative ideas, but it couldn't save the company. So in 1991, Pan Am went bankrupt and shut down. The third nature of change in the environment, the third variable, is resource scarcity. When we speak of resource scarcity, we're referring to the availability of resources critical to a company or that are in high demand by other companies. Resource scarcity is usually the result of a shortage of supply, but it can also result from the demand driving up prices. In conditions of resource scarcity, a company may not be able to acquire resources it needs in order for it to operate or in order for it to grow. Very clear example at present. Lithium-ion batteries are now used extensively in electronic devices, tools, and electric cars. Should there one day be a scarcity in lithium supply, it would severely impact operations of companies like Tesla, which requires a lot of lithium for its battery factory. The ambitious growth plans of Tesla could be jeopardized if there should be a scarcity in lithium someday. Executives often deal with supply chain disruptions, which can cause raw material and component supply chain shortages. The reason for these disruptions include manufacturing equipment failure, fire damage, and even natural disaster. For instance, in March of 2011, Japanese earthquake caused havoc in the supply chain of automakers, computer manufacturers, and industry. The instability, complexity, and resource scarcity, they all lead to uncertainty. Uncertainty refers to how predictable or unpredictable environmental conditions are. In an uncertain environment, it is very difficult for business leaders to predict where and how change will occur. Instead, business leaders must make decisions not based on facts, but based on assumptions. The problem when you make decisions based on assumptions is that you are really just guessing. So companies that guess right benefit from that uncertainty, and companies that guess wrongly suffer. A clear example, in the 1990s, when oil prices were around $50 a barrel, there was no clear information to predict what would happen in the near future. There was one airline, Southwest Airlines bet that fuel prices would go up. What did they do? They hedged against all price increases. Other airlines bet that prices would be stable or decline. When oil prices soared from $50 to $100 per barrel, Southwest was able to remain profitable, whereas the other airlines lost more than $6 billion. In summary, nothing stays the same. In today's environment, it is difficult for business leaders to identify and understand rapid and unexpected changes in the environment. Conditions of instability, complexity, resource scarcity, and uncertainty make it impossible for business leaders to anticipate change and make rational decisions. Instead, business leaders have to operate with incomplete data and base decisions on assumptions or best guesses. This makes good managers who use their experience and training to guess right more often even more important to the organization. Now, let us use what we have discussed to the present COVID crisis. The COVID crisis today is often likened to the 1997 Asian financial crisis and the 2008 global financial crisis. Is there a basis for such a comparison? In a way, yes. Why? Because they're all crises. But aside from that, everything else is different. In the previous financial crisis, there was a way to pinpoint the cause of the crisis, or at least the different variables that brought about those financial crises. The fact that the crisis was attributable to certain variables made it easier to prescribe, correctly or incorrectly, the measures that would either take us out of such crisis or the measures that would preclude the recurrence of similar crises. In the present crisis that we are facing, it is not a financial crisis. It is a health crisis that could bring about a financial crisis. The main difference between the present situation and the previous crisis is that even health authorities, we're talking of global health authorities, are not even certain about the origin of the virus, how it is spreading, how it can be contained, what body parts it is attacking, and how to prevent contamination from it. There are different theories, and every theory brings forth a set of prescriptions which appears to change day by day. One day, we're told we don't need to wear masks. The next day, the virus is considered airborne, which makes wearing of masks a necessity. The first month, intubation was deemed appropriate. A few months later, there are those who put forward the advice that intubation is the wrong procedure. From being a virus that attacks the lungs, it has become the virus that clots blood vessels in several vital parts of the body. In short, after 5 to 6 months, we are still uncertain what we are facing with. Given that, how do we chart the course forward? A while ago, we spoke about business organizations utilizing strategy to integrate internal functions and activities, as well as integrating the business with the external environment. And we talked about the four components that describe the nature of change: stability, complexity, resource scarcity, and uncertainty. We said that stability refers to the rate at which change occurs. In a stable environment, we said change is slow. In a dynamic environment, change is fast. The environment that we are facing today is certainly not stable. Neither can it be described as dynamic. It is an environment that is completely erratic. With this nature of change, how do business monitor? How do business respond to changing conditions, since there is neither rhyme nor reason in the chaotic environment brought about by the COVID-19 crisis? Then we talked about complexity, which refers to the number of elements in the organization's environment and their connections. We said that in a highly complex environment, there are many variables that affect the company. In this case, the single most important variable is the virus, whose nature and characteristics and lifespan are yet unknown to us. Yet that single dominant variable has produced widespread adverse consequences on every aspect of our lives. It is a single variable, yet its consequences are far more complex than in most multivariable situations. The other component that describes the nature of change in the environment, we said, is resource scarcity, which refers to the availability of resources critical to the company. But if we refer to the cash-to-cash chart that we showed earlier, we will see that this crisis has resulted in all types of scarcity. If we look at box number 2, scarcity of personnel, because a total lockdown would not allow people to work. Even a partial lockdown deprives business with human resources because of the constraints imposed on the transport system. Number 2 again, the scarcity of material, especially during the first 2 months, because transport of goods was severely affected. Then we have the scarcity of cash. We said that after the cash out, we need the cash in. But how do we produce the cash if there's a lockdown and it prevents sales activities? Now, assuming you're able to sell because you sold online. So even if sales have been achieved, the imposition of moratorium on payments prevented sales from being converted into cash that is badly needed by the business in order for it to continue operations. Now, before we start arguing about why we are talking about saving businesses and not people, there is no dichotomy between saving business on one hand and saving people. As we save businesses, we are actually saving people who depend on these businesses for their livelihood. All of these components that describe the nature of change in the environment, instability, complexity, resource scarcity, all lead to uncertainty. So, how would one expect business leaders to address this pandemic? First, we need to acknowledge that there are certain things that are out of our control. Many of us have learned that despite all the planning exercises we had, we can miss our targets. In spite of all the hard work, we can lose our jobs. And we learn that things that may have worked in the past might not work anymore. All of these events have served to create a general atmosphere of anxiety, of uncertainty. Our response should be a recognition that there are things beyond our control, such as this virus. We need to focus on the basics and direct our full attention to things that we truly have control over, our own actions. The objective is to create certainty in uncertain times. Again, the objective is to create certainty in uncertain times. Some of the things that we can do to get business back on track are number one, activities, action. We see many organizations that have gone into hibernation mode. They laid off workers, froze spending, and have essentially put things on hold until the economy comes back. While it's certainly smart to evaluate and prudently keep expenses in check, a wait and see posture will not help, particularly with all the changes going on beyond the general economic condition. So waiting isn't a good answer. Action. Action breeds momentum. It breeds interest. It breeds engagement. It breeds more action. The nice thing here is that while things have slowed down considerably, there continues to be a lot of new developments, particularly in marketing, particularly in online marketing. And there is no lack of things for us to do in positioning ourselves within this medium. It just takes courage, commitment, and an open mind to do so. Second, we must start again with a plan. One of the biggest mistakes that businesses continue to make is acting without a plan. You need to have a plan that leads that activity and base the plan not on your own needs, but base the plan on the needs of the market. The question that one must always ask when confronted with a crisis is this: what do people need now? What do people want now? And respond to that need. This is the most important time to be market responsive. We continue living in a changing world. That means that you need a new plan of attack from time to time. And it is not easy under such stressful environment. Planning successfully can occur only if one is willing to do so with a very different lenses than normal times. Number three, we must be adaptable. You've heard this before. The only thing that is consistent today, or the only thing that is constant, is change. Therefore, we have to continue reimagining. No matter how good one is, there's always room to be better. Therefore, it is important for everyone in the organization to think of ways and means to improve oneself, to improve the processes, to upgrade the skills, to learn new things, and to do things differently. In the process, we would encounter failures. But we should never be afraid of failures. Why? If we are to be afraid of failure during times of crisis, we would be immobilized by fear. This is the worst time to be immobilized, to remain static. Therefore, we need to encourage initiatives, we need to encourage original ideas, and openly announce that one should not be immobilized by this fear of failure. Otherwise, the process of reimagining would never succeed. Finally, we have to think small and nimble. Organizations, as they grow and prosper, tend to be very structured. They tend to be very heavy. And that usually is the beginning of the end. Why? Because business organizations that are successful always feel the need of institutionalizing structures and processes because they have this notion that it is these structures and processes that allow them to succeed. Maybe so, but times change. People in the internal organization change. The external variables in the environment change. And when the business organization is so structured and heavy, it becomes very difficult for them to adapt to these changes. The executives in many of these big organizations, they love structures. Why? Because they are the ones on top of these structures. And it is fantastic to perpetrate themselves in positions of power. Besides, if we are to be honest about it, a structured business environment is so much easier on the laid back executive who need not engage in constant thinking, in constant reimagining. But in a crisis situation, it is important to have that mindset of a small organization that is less heavy, less structured, and one which is more nimble. Why? Because it is easier to adapt, it is easier to change. Regardless of who made the decision, be it the president or CEO, the chairman, if the decision is wrong, it should be discarded immediately. That's the beauty of thinking small. Nobody should be indispensable, and no decision in the organization should be sacred. Now, at the enterprise level, what did we do in Empire East to meet the challenge of the COVID crisis? We decided that we needed to communicate the correct information to our people. With all the information overload from social media, many of which are fake news, we organized a team to cull the information out there so that we can have up to date and accurate information regarding the crisis, which we would cascade to our people. That communications team is still there. It's a very important component of how we deal with the crisis. When the government announced the partial opening of business, foremost in our mind was one thing: the welfare of our people. We organized a pre opening team, and everything was just for the welfare of our people. The health of our people was the primary consideration. The government allowed 50% of our business to go back to the office. Did we allow 50% of our workforce to go back to the office? No. Did we allow 40%? No. For a company like ours, with employees, including sales agents of more than 1,000 people, did we allow 30%? No. Did we allow 20%? No. How many did we allow to go back to work? We allowed 20 people to go back to work, maximum. Why? Because our primary consideration was the health of our people, the welfare of our people. Those were very dangerous times, and we did not want to have to sacrifice our people for the sake of business. The other thing that we did, whenever government changes from ECQ to MECQ to GCQ, it's always either on a Monday or on the first day of the month or on the 16th of the month. Do we allow our people to also keep up with that change? The answer is no. When the change would occur on the 16th, we do not change on the 16th. We change on the 18th. Why? Because on the 16th, most people will do the next phase. And that's where all the mistakes come in. They need the next day to process it and to correct it. So we have 2 days to look at other people, look at their mistakes, see how they've corrected it. And it's only on the third day that we allow that shift to happen in our company. And part of taking care of the health of our people, we had health survey forms that had to be continually updated. At that time, we had rapid tests because that was the only test that was required. We gave health kits to all our people. Every single person would have a health kit. And in that health kit, you had face masks, face shields, alcohol, soap, gloves, and other necessities. We set aside isolation rooms with PPEs. We had a health officer and a deputy health officer. With arrangement with hospitals and health providers, just in case something happens. We installed acrylic separators in all the meeting rooms, and we contracted the third party to do a total disinfection of all our offices. And we came up with foot baths and signages. Our signages had to be extraordinarily provocative. That's the reason why I think Rappler picked up those signages. Why? Because the medium is a message. We want our people to read the signages and to follow them. The other thing that we did, we had a series of online meetings. The online meetings within the department and online meetings between the president and all the employees. People were asking, why should the president meet all the employees by batches online? It's usually the job of HR. The reason why it was important was because it was important for them to see a face, to allow them to identify with the leadership that would hold their hands and give them hope that the leadership would somehow lead them out of the present situation. The other thing that we did, a lot of companies would say that they went into computerization. Good thing for us in Empire is the computerization process was a process that we've been doing for many years. How did we change? We changed not by merely computerizing, because we believe that when you speak of computerization, it really means just the digitization of the same process. For us, we have to do more than that. We came up with a transmutation plan, which is the transformation of what we were to what we want to be. Example of what is part of that plan: work from home. We never imagined that work from home will work. Never in our life did we imagine that work from home will work. We talked about it before, but because it became a necessity, we realized that work from home not only works, it's even better than requiring people to come in. And because of that, part of our transmutation plan is to have a goal. And the goal is right, even after the COVID crisis, the objective is only 30% of the workforce will report to the office. 70% will permanently stay home and work from home. Therefore, they do not have to spend 4 to 5 hours commuting and getting tired. Instead, they can prepare, they can be with their family, and they can produce better output. So that's part of our transportation plan. While all of these were going on, we took into consideration the fact that the crisis may have adversely affected the mental health of our people. Because of that, we decided that we need to offer advice, and we informed them that they can contact us should they feel the need to do so. We cannot let people keep on hanging, especially when it comes to their mental health. On top of that, we have this what we call contactless process from sales to collection. Why? Because we do not want to spread contamination. It was not easy. Within the organization, it was easy. But with our external constituents, it was not very easy. For instance, there were banks that resisted it. When banks resisted it, my instruction was change banks. The banks will follow. Now, our dealings with the bank is contactless. You will see that this is very important. You can initiate change and insist on these changes. At the end of it all, it is really just a perspective. Instead of looking at the COVID crisis as a crisis, we can look at it as an opportunity to transform, an opportunity for change. In Empire East, we always remind our people that while we may not be able to control the external environment, we should not be paralyzed by the sense of helplessness. Instead, we should use this opportunity to strengthen ourselves as we prepare for more uncertainties ahead of us. We always remind ourselves that the same boiling water that softens the potato hardens the egg. Much depends on what we are made of, regardless of the circumstances we face. With that, I end my part. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Attorney Charlie Yu. Very, very beautiful. From all the way from Harvey to Senator Bam. With Attorney Charlie Yu, very, very powerful principles in change management in a VUCA situation, a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous change. And these are very real practices. I think from our powerful resource panelists, we have a lot of questions, and especially while you guys were presenting, the questions were coming in, and these are very, very direct questions. No, Camille, can we go direct to the questions? Camille, let me just get a check from the team. Okay, yeah, I think so. There were some questions earlier during the presentation because some people could not wait and they were already asking. The first question from Margaret Sarangaya: what kind of support, I guess this is directed to Senator Bam, no? Should the government give SMEs? And pero you might want to be able to do, he already mentioned that. Perhaps Margaret is probably looking at something more definite, Senator Bam?
Well, they need cash. They need cash, no? Ganun kasimple. If it were a loan, it would be with a long moratorium of repayment, no? Other countries have done this actually. If I'm not mistaken, the UK support for their MSMEs includes 1-year support from government or a 1-year guarantee. Napag-usapan na rin in another forum. They called it something else, but it acts like a guarantee where it will still be the local banks supporting the SMEs. If I'm not mistaken, and Charlie can correct me if I'm wrong, alam ko that banks now are not really loaning so-called riskier companies or not really, hindi talaga naglo-loan ngayon kasi napaka-uncertain nga ng mga bagay-bagay. But maybe with the guarantee from government, that could change. No? So it's different if it's government lending itself. No? I mean, siya mismo yung nagpapautang, and that usually ends up maybe with bad debts. It's also a different program if it's a guarantee, if they're guaranteeing a local bank, for example. But definitely, it has to be now, it has to be sizable, because kung magpaligoy-ligoy pa yan, if these support again, grant or loan comes at the end of the year, it might be too late already for a lot of our SMEs. So kailangan na siyang madaliin. And honestly, I think there are facilities. You don't need a new law for it. There probably are facilities already that government can do. But somebody needs to really push it. No? Hindi naman po ito unknown because in a lot of fora, pinag-uusapan po ito. A lot of SMEs have already stated that they are in dire straits. No? Talagang problemado po sila. Another way to do it is, of course, is to assure business. No, and this is something that we've been discussing, although I honestly think it will take a little bit longer, is if government could use its resources wiser and utilize its budget and the things that it purchases and be able to support local businesses better also. Pero sa totoo lang, that will take time. The quickest solution is really to come up with a X billion guarantee program for SMEs. They will say, mahirap hanapin. That's not true. You know, BIR has the list of your SMEs that pay, the negosyo centers, which are practically in all LGUs already, have a list of SMEs also, MSMEs that have registered with them. So meron ng paraan to actually support our MSMEs. You can have kulatilla there. You can have conditions that if you receive this loan, you will not fire anybody for X months, or you will keep a certain level of your plantilla for X months. Marami naman pong pwedeng gawin, no? But I think it's crucial that if we're looking at support, ano na siya talaga? Diretso na talaga siya. Keep them alive for the next 6 months until, you know, we get a better handle on the pandemic or until a vaccine comes. Keep them alive, keep them up and running. No? Sabi nga ni Charlie, keep going, di ba? Like the clock. So we have to support them. We have to support our MSMEs to keep going and keep alive.
Okay. We have a lot of questions. So Margaret, she has a follow-up question. We'll probably get to that later to give a chance to everyone.
One sentence lang. Kulang yan.
Go ahead.
Kulang
yan.
yan.
Okay. Thank you daw, Senator Bam. Maybe Attorney Charlie or Harvey can also chime in and very short on the question.
Yung sa akin, Jess, no, what those agree ako with Senator Bam that cash is very important because ang ganda ng sinabi ni Charlie kanina when he opened yung cash to cash cycle niya. You know what there are things kasi that are very volatile right now. Bigyan ko ng halimbawa, no. Nung doon sa cash to cash cycle ni Charlie, meron doon siyang nilagay na accounts receivable. Ano ibig sabihin ng accounts receivable? Ito yung mga customers na may utang sa'yo. Meaning, nag-deliver ka na ng goods sa kanila pero meron silang credit terms, mga 30 days, 60 days, so, in-expect mo na in 30 days, they will pay you. So that you'll have the cash to be able to buy the material and to be able to provide work to your employees, di ba? So, yun yung sinasabi ni Charlie na cash to cash. Dahil sa pandemic na to, for example, in our end, sa company namin, we had customers who actually closed and they had receivables sa amin. So, meaning, it's a domino effect. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Ibig sabihin nun, hindi na sila makakabayad. Bakit? Sinasabi nila, sorry, temporary closure kami. We can't pay you because we don't have any money right now. So therefore, ano nangyayari nun? Our cash flow is affected. If our cash flow is affected, we cannot buy the raw materials needed. We cannot pay the people that are in our office, our employees. So that's why tama talaga si Bam. What we need is to infuse the cash to us, to the businesses, so that we can continue the cycle. Or else, there'll be a domino effect. Ano mangyayari niyan? I'll tell you. Aside from the domino effect na us businesses being aggravated by our customers not being able to pay, we can't blame them. It's the pandemic. Marami sa kanila sarado. We also have a hard time dealing with the banks. Because syempre, may utang din kami sa banks. We have to also pay the banks. But syempre, we know that kung walang cash in, ano ibabayad mo sa bangko? It's a domino effect. That's why tama rin si Bam. Kung ako yung bangko, ba't ako magpapautang ngayon? Hindi ko sigurado mababayaran. So it's very hard. It's a very volatile situation because you don't know if you want to actually, for example, in our end, may mga major clients kami na humihingi ng terms. O tulungan nyo naman kami maghingi ng terms, we can get the product first, then in 30 days we'll pay you. Pero what if in 30 days hindi sila magbayad? Yung accounts receivable nila, wala. So that's loss na for us. anong ibibili namin ng raw material? So the cash-to-cash flow is disrupted.
Okay. Attorney Charlie, you want to chime into that before we go to the next question?
Well, I believe, like Bam and Harvey, that there's a need for infusion. However, prior to, kasi yung madali naman, there are creative ways and means to go about it. The important thing lang is that we have to ensure the integrity of the process.
Yun.
Otherwise, everything will be lost. Yun lang. Sana, we can ensure the integrity of the process.
Okay. A second question is from Miss Michelle Aquino pala. Hindi Michelle Yu, Michelle Aquino to Attorney Charlemagne Yu. Can you give us your insights regarding the struggle between economic growth, or I guess survival, and protecting the health of your people? You seem to have mukhang nagustuhan niya yung insights. Why should we open up the economy when it would just lead to more deaths? So there's really a struggle there.
I think the question presupposes that there is a constant ongoing conflict between health and lives of the people on one hand, and the opening of the business establishments, which would supposedly allow the economy to grow on the other hand. No? But I don't think it is an either-or situation or a zero-sum game. In the formulation of policies, the two ought to go hand in hand. The rationale behind a lockdown or a general quarantine is to hopefully stop the spread of the virus. This presupposes that forcing people to stay at home would protect them against contamination. But the assumption is that one's home allows social distancing. Unfortunately, such assumption is not correct, since a large part of our urban population live in the slums, with shanties that would not even allow all the occupants to sleep at the same time because of space restrictions. And the community is such that the next door neighbor is just a few inches away from the window of one's shanty. As such, in certain areas in the metropolis, a lockdown can actually result in one contaminated person affecting the entire community of informal settlers because of the unfortunate circumstances they are faced with. Now, as to this decision to open up business establishments, the argument put forward is that it would help the economy grow. But we must remember that much of the growth in our country is really consumer driven. That's why the thinking is that opening up business establishments would bring back the consumer, which in turn would make the economy grow. In normal times, or even in other types of crisis, that would be true. But ours is a health crisis. Unless we address the health issue, even if we open up the business establishments, there is no guarantee that the consumers would come back in droves, enough to make a dent in our economy. So in response to our query, this is not binary in nature. There are a lot of variables that must be considered in the formulation of such policies. That's why accurate information, data, scientific facts are even more important today in order for all of us to formulate and come up with better policies that would benefit all.
Okay. So I guess that's a very strong argument, even with the Attorney Yu's presentation. There needs to be a balance. And that's why I think there's a lot of rigor that needs to be put in just deciding between, hindi siya straight binary na lockdowns. Very good answer. Yung next question natin would be from RV Corpus. And given the current unemployment figures and percentage of labor force that is connected with SMEs, is there a point where it is too late for some industries already, like the Marikina shoe industry, for example? I think this might be directed to Senator Bam or probably Harvey.
Meron talagang industries which will have a difficult time operating now. Now, okay, so let me premise this one. I'm not talking about the Marikina shoe industry here. I'm talking about industries in general. But number one, there will be industries that will see the lockdown as an opportunity. You have e-commerce, logistics. There was already a quick study about industries already. Some BPOs, and then there are industries which are problemado talaga, no? Tourism, entertainment, so on and so forth. We have to accept that there are some industries which cannot survive in this pandemic. Kahit anong gawin mo, no? Kahit anong gawin mo, mahihirapan ka talaga. And that's why we say we have to support their pivoting. We have to support their shift to a tangential business, or we have to shift them to a different business model, or shift them completely. Be the choreographer who is now selling chicken inasal. Baka kailangan talaga ibang negosyo na talaga yung gawin ninyo. And part of what Harvey and Charlie said is that we have to look at it squarely, no? We can't be in denial. We have to look at it squarely. There will be businesses that will inevitably do better. There will be businesses which will have a difficult time thriving or surviving. Now, ang premise number 2 ko naman is that hindi naman to forever. You know, admittedly, I actually felt na by September, back to normal na tayo. Back in March, no? I think I was talking to Harvey about that. Okay, I agree, mali ako. Hindi siya September.
Hindi pala.
Oh,
Hindi
I
pala
have moved it.
September.
Inusog na natin. Sana naman bago Mayo or bago maybe March to May, we're looking at some semblance, no? Maybe that's too optimistic still. But it's not hindi naman to forever. So if you're a company and hindi mo talaga kaya you can't really transact now, you have to shift. You have to be able to address the uncertainty, address the volatility, and do something else, or do something, maybe using your assets, using your expertise, using the structures that you have, do something else. But one of the points I wanted to raise kanina, Jess, was that government should support that. Because alam naman natin which industries talagang problemado. Alam natin yung mga industriya may chance na mag-grow. Since alam natin yan, we need to be able to support them on a more, how do you call it? Yung mas specific na tulong.
Deliberate. More deliberate.
More deliberate, exactly. More deliberate yung tulong sa mga industriya na maraming mga nagtatrabaho na talagang mahihirapan ngayon. Help them shift. Maybe they have no choice but really to go in hibernation or to lower their workforce. Yung mga tao doon, anong gagawin nila? Kailangan natin silang tulungan pa rin, 'di ba? And maybe that shift is something that they just need to do. Now, ano yan? Depende yan sa geography, depende yan sa industriya, because we're talking from an NCR point of view. But there are parts of the country which have 0 cases. There are parts of the country where matagal na silang nag-MGCQ. So maybe it's also a matter of looking at where in the country we should be. No? And I think the national discussion is too focused on the areas where the cases are the highest, obviously, because nandun yung mga problema. But we also need to look at the cases where, the areas where cases are not as high and how they are also thriving. I'll give an example na lang, very quickly. We're doing, and Jess knows this, no? We're doing the Bright Project, no?
Yes.
Yes. And we did the pilot in Marikina, and we're doing a pilot in Palawan. It's a barangay resiliency project. Ano yung pinagkaiba? Sa Marikina, may mga cases yung mga tao. In that barangay in Palawan, wala silang cases. 0. No? For the last couple of months. But because walang turista, they're economically problematic. So, barangay resiliency pa rin yung hinahanap, COVID-related pa rin, pero hindi health yung problema nila. Yung problema nila, wala silang economic activity because of tourists. No? And then you have naman Marikina, where it's in the middle of the city. They're worried about people getting sick. They're worried about public transportation. They're worried about not being able to get the relief goods to the proper families. Iba rin yung concern, but it's still COVID-related. No? So, we might also need to start looking at ano ba yung nangyayari sa labas ng mga area na maraming cases, because they also are undergoing a lot of things, and their solutions might be very different from the solutions that we are proposing now for the areas na maraming cases.
Thank you, Senator Bam. Anybody else would like to comment on that? And what I'll do is siguro is ask in series kasi we really have a lot of questions. We have a very active attendee right now. I'll ask it. Go ahead, Harvey.
Ako simple lang, no? I think if you want to talk about economy and if you want to talk about businesses surviving, the consumer really has to have the confidence to go out and to buy, no? But right now, because of the pandemic, even if you allow 100% opening of all the restaurants, of all the bars, all the gyms, kung araw-araw nakikita ng tao na 4,000 cases every day, even ako, I will not even dare to go out. So you're just, even if you allow all the businesses and lift all the restrictions, unless this public health crisis is solved or at least lowered, minimized, you won't see people going out. You won't see people going out and eating in restaurants and eating in bars, even if you lift all this restriction. It's all about consumer confidence, and that's only going to happen if they are confident enough that they will not get sick if they eat out, if they go out.
Thank you, Harvey. Our next series of questions, siguro ang gagawin ko, I'll group them together. With the buy local aspect of SMEs, is there a government side to push for larger corporations, say Grab or Ayala Malls, SM, to further support small business to be part of the offerings? Siguro before you answer that, Senator Bam, I'll also group some questions with that. What do you think would be the trajectory of businesses by the time we ultimately go back to normal? Would SMEs choose to continue on or not go back to their usual 8 to 5 jobs? And then, I think that's good enough grouping. Yes. Mukhang SMEs yun related, Senator Bam.
I'll answer the first question. Baka si Charlie or Harvey want to answer the second question. To be honest, the trajectory isn't very bright, no? As we said, talagang namomroblema yung mga tao. A number of those who are unemployed, marami dyan galing sa mga SMEs, no? Because by the sheer number of people who are working in SMEs, that 47% self-rated poverty, I wouldn't be surprised if a number of that 47% come from your SME sector. So the support, the infusion needs to happen soon.
Yes.
And ano yan kapag nalugi ka na, it's harder to get back up. No, it's mas madali to get some infusion and do your best to just stay alive for the next couple of months kung may tulong sa'yo. Sa Pilipinas kasi usually it's F&F, sabi nila, 'di ba? Family and friends. Doon tayo humingi ng tulong. But if your family and friends also are problematic, no? Wala ka nang mahihingan ng tulong. So there really has to be an infusion for the SME sector. And alam naman nila 'yan. Alam naman 'yan ng gobyerno. To be fair, no? They've been talking about it already. It's really now a matter of what is the most appropriate scheme that can support your SMEs. Kapag nag-offer ka, of course kukunin 'yan. At this point, kukunin 'yan. Pero you owe it to them to make sure that the policy is one where they can still thrive. 'Di ba? So kasama na dyan yung moratorium on payments. Kasama na dyan yung maybe some conditions in terms of how to use the funds. No? So a well thought out policy given at the right time for our SMEs can hopefully save a number of the SMEs from really going under. Kasi yung sinasabi ni Harvey na sunod-sunod yan or domino effect yan, totoo po yan. Once mag-domino effect yan sa isang pamilya, tuloy-tuloy po yan. No? So, the trajectory doesn't seem to be very good right now, but with support, whether it's from the business sector, from government, or wherever we can get it, we need to do it soon so that we can stop more SMEs from closing down.
Siguro, can you do just a brief follow-up on that? What would an MFI role in trying to also sustain SMEs?
Well, as Jess knows, no, I'm parang I consider the MFI as my home sector also.
Yes.
Obviously importante, and if you're an MSME, and usually the MFIs deal with the M, no, the micro, and maybe yung mga tumutungtong sa small level.
Yeah, which is the 91% in your presentation.
Yes. Kailangan ng tulong yan. And ang mga Pilipino, madiskarte tayo. If we have an opportunity, we will take it. In fact, a number of MFIs have already told me na tumataas yung inquiries, no? Tumataas yung dami ng mga taong humihingi ng suporta sa kanila. But, and this is where maybe some partnership with government can come in, they need to be able to change the way that they collect. Because the collection of MFIs is a weekly meeting. No? As you know, most do weekly meetings. And right now, ang hirap ng weekly meeting. Mahirap yung weekly meeting na agad-agad may kinikita ka kaagad, no? So, with some support from government, they might be able to shift it a little bit. Maybe lower the interest rate if there's support from government or there's shared liability or a guarantee, or even do a moratorium for the first few months. Magbabago yung kanilang modelo, no? Which is very, very difficult for them and very, very stressful for them. But you need to look at where the market is, ano yung capacity niya to be able to pay, and come up with a compromise. No? Still be able to exact the discipline of paying back, but come up with a scheme that fits the current situation of your borrowers na baka hindi kayang agad-agad magbayad.
Okay.
Uh,
Sige. So go ahead, Attorney Charlie.
yeah, sa akin lang is that I will not be prescriptive in my answer, no, because the answer would depend on the different situations. No, rather I want to emphasize that given this crisis, we just all need a paradigm shift. We need to think out of the box. Hindi naman walang solusyon eh. Marami namang solusyon eh, but somebody has to think through all these solutions and to see how we can safeguard the integrity while we are implementing these solutions. So we need a complete paradigm shift. The question whether or not it'll be 8 to 5, it all depends. In offices, you don't need to be 8 to 5, but in factories, you may need to be 8 to 5. So it all depends. But what the challenge right now for business leaders is for us to think out of the box, and we think out of the box not purely for profit, but we think out of the box also in order to help the people who are working with us and the community around us. So that I think is very important.
Okay, so from what is emerging in the conversation, it seems that kailangan ng government support that is very deliberate, but at the same time, so to improve the environment and stabilize, but at the same time, from the businesses themselves, there has to be some sort of transformation. So I think yun yung lumalabas na sa conversation. Harvey, you have nag-chime in ka na. Go ahead, Harbs.
Yung ako agree ako na personally for me, even if we go back optimistically to what Bam said na sana soon makabalik na tayo sa normal. I would probably still look at the possibility of work from home for many of our employees that are based in the office. If it works, why not, diba? Honestly, I wasn't really optimistic it would work. We had to have a very hard adjustment for us in the company, given that many of our employees were really used to staying in the office. Right now, we even, for example, ngayon, even if the MECQ has been lifted, tuloy pa rin kami na less than 50% of people are in the offices. No? So it's really still that na kung sino yung pwedeng mag-work from home for us, mag-work from home. However, there's a caveat there. Some of our employees may not be suitable for that and may have a hard time in terms of dealing with their mental health if they continue to just stay at home. So we also tell our employees, if you need to go to the office, then we can provide you that opportunity to work in the office, provided that the maximum number of people in the office has not been reached. We have a maximum now in our offices, primarily to ensure that physical distancing is possible. And when I say physical distancing, we're talking about at least 6 feet from each other, and there will not be any crowding in any place in our office. So we make sure that these are the standard health and safety protocols are observed in our offices and factories.
Thank you, Harvey. There are other questions. So there are two streams of questions coming in. Thank you, Camille, for directing the question to Charlie. But before we get to that wider perspective, I'd like to shift the questioning a little bit with this good question from one of our anonymous attendee that actually focuses on the informal economy. We are talking about the small and even micro enterprises that Senator Bam was talking about, the 91%. But nevertheless, a big portion of that, and we've seen this in the CSO collab in one of the groups I'm with, talks about how, and the question is this: how does our government help workers in informal sectors? These are most likely unregistered, no, or informal economy. Snack vendors, mga talipapa, find employment. What are some of the public-private partnerships or initiatives? Maybe wala lang pangalan, pero there are some that are coming up right now because that's very emerging. But maybe we can also diverge a little bit from SMEs to talk about the informal sector, which is a big part of the economy as well. Can anybody respond first to that? Okay.
I
Mahirap,
personally don't
mahirap yung
know.
informal. Oo. Yung informal kasi unregistered. These are the walang business permit, walang which usually
May
sila
ano
yung
yan?
nagugutom.
Yes, just ano yan. Even if wala yung BIR, merong permit yan sa lokal.
Sa local, yes, sa mga
Yes, kasi
barangay. Oo.
kahit yung nagbebenta ng fishball or hotdog o kung ano man, meron pa ring sticker yan mula sa barangay o mula sa
Oo.
LGU.
Oo.
Um,
Siguro to put some friction on the question. I'm supposed to be the moderator. We activated 6,000 informal sector talipapa in payatas in the CSO collab during the ECQ. But what we did was we chose those that were food related and made sure that they contributed to the last mile distribution. So in a way, it was inclusive supply chain and at the last mile end. But these are
go ahead.
go ahead. These are part of the things that the government need to see. Go ahead, Senator Bam.
I was just gonna say, hindi sila invisible. Alam
Yes,
yan.
yes.
Alam ng barangay yan. Alam ng mga tao yan. Alam ng LGU yan. So to say that just because hindi sila nakarehistro sa BIR is not an excuse not to be able to reach them. Kasi pag panahon ng kampanya, lahat yan naaabot. Pero
Yes,
pag panahon ng tulong,
panahon
suddenly,
ng tulong,
hindi mahahanap. Hindi pwede yun.
That's true.
Mahahanap at mahahanap sila. And
Oh.
again, the type of support will be different. Iba-iba yung support na dyan. Maybe it's likely some of them are part of the 4-piece program or some of them are getting need some direct support. But even if you go sari-sari store level, no? Sari-sari store level, let's say hindi man mahanap yung mga sari, although imposible to, but let's say hindi mahanap yung sari-sari store. You go to the distributors, you go to the pure golds of this world, and you allow them to extend a credit line for your sari-sari store owners. They are likely, distributors are already likely providing some kind of one up, one down or some kind of scheme anyway sa mga sari-sari store owners natin. If you infuse support at the level of the distributor or even the aggregator, aabot yan. Kung may kulatili yan na, tutulong ko to sa inyo, pero this means kailangan ka mag-extend ng credit sa mga tindahan na binebentahan mo. And every distributor, every aggregator, these days, even supermarkets, may mga programs na yan for your sari-sari stores. Hindi na sila mahirap hanapin. So there are ways to be able to hit even your informal sector and be able to provide support for them. Na iba pa yan from the direct support as individual, as Filipinos, iba pa yung suporta mo para sa mga micro-negosyo. No? It can be done.
Okay, thank you. Siguro just before we get to the question on Attorney Charlie, which is more macro on the Asian financial crisis, I'll just go through some of the SMEs or some related questions, and I'll group them together. These are two related questions. The first one is, what do you believe is the distinct role of the youth or millennials versus baby boomers in helping drive job creation and or brainstorming various solutions to our country's pressing needs? What are some of the avenues? This the one related to that. Are there organizations that link up incubators, social enterprises to young professionals as employees? I'm currently unemployed and I'm looking at working for the above mentioned startup incubator or social enterprise. Thank you.
Yes. The question regarding the startup incubator, baka we can take that offline. If kasi nakalagay ata anonymous siya, no?
Oo. Ayun, nababasa nyo rin pala. Oo.
Yes, but if they're willing to provide their information to Kaya Natin, we can get back to them and link he or she up to some of the startup incubators that are currently operational. I don't know if they're hiring, but we can definitely link our AA, our anonymous attendee to them kung kailangan.
Okay. Sige. Maybe this is a good time to shift cadence kasi yung ating mga question medyo wide and varied. This is directed to Attorney Charlie Yu. Speaking of crises and having mentioned a comparison to the Asian financial crisis and the global financial crisis, how relevant in the current planning is the concept of too big to fail in terms of local corporations?
Again, for leveling up purposes, when they say too big to fail, ibig sabihin lang noon is that, let's say may utang yung isang kumpanya at hindi makapagbayad, ang ginagawa ng banko usually is the bank will go against that particular company. No? Pero pag masyadong malaki ang utang, what happens is that the banks are the ones who are scared to go against the company because if that company goes down, it will bring the bank down. No? So yan yung concept ng too big to fail. No? Ibang-iba today compared to 1997 because in 1997, halos hindi pa tayo nakaranas ng crisis na gano'n. Therefore, it caught the banks by surprise. Since 1997, there were a lot of measures that were implemented by Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, etc., which would preclude such a crisis from recurring today in the scale that it did in 1997 to 2001, 2002. For example, in the housing industry, dati-dati kasi, anong ginagawa in 1997, in the 1990s, all you have to do, anyone can be a developer. Why? Because you can get a piece of property and then you pre-sell. So when you pre-sell, people will have to pay 30%. And the developer will use the money being paid to him to build. But since year 2001, because there were no sales from 1997 to 2001, I remember in our company, Emperor East, we came up with a scheme where we said, because there was demand, that we a lot of people do not have housing. There was supply, but nobody was buying. So there was a disjunction between supply and demand. So we said, what's wrong? So we decided to come up with a scheme called no down payment. With that kind of scheme, which we started in 2001 and which is followed up to now, with that kind of scheme, you cannot have fly-by-night developers. Why? Kasi you'll have to support yourself. Dapat mahaba yung PC mo in order for you to become a developer. So because of all these changes that happen as a result of the 1997 crisis, it becomes more difficult to have the magnitude of that crisis recur. I'm not saying that it's impossible. It is possible, but that kind of magnitude is very difficult unless you're talking about crony loans. So hopefully there are no crony loans. Because when you have crony loans, may problema ka talaga. Maski anong gawin mo, maski
all the measures are broken. All the safety measures are bypassed. Yeah. Okay. This other question, most likely is also directed to Attorney Charlie because environmentalist. May I know whether zero waste business have room in the economy during this time of crisis? Because I guess you spoke about innovation early and transformation. Do you think it's time that we mandate our producers and suppliers to do so? Why or why not?
Actually, environmental practices are even more important today than it was before. Because you have, in fact, in our company, the reason why we decided to go environmental was because of need. Simply, need. Diba? Imbis na itapon mo yung papel, i-recycle mo yung papel, i-upcycle mo yung papel. So bakit mo itatapon? So you will see that because of the crisis, what happens is that people will become more frugal and will think of ways and means to recycle or upcycle. So whether or not it has a place, environmental protection, conservation strategies will always have a place, whatever the situation is. And it is really the way forward.
Okay, we're almost down to our last question, and I think a good way to ask that question and choosing that question would be what Attorney Charlie also spoke about earlier in establishing a communication team. In one of our the groups I was with, they were talking about the crisis being so ambiguous and uncertain that you really need a strong communication team. Would you be able to answer, if we were an SME, do I need now a communication team? What do you think from our panelists?
Yes. I perfectly agree with Charlie. Communication in terms of within the organization, it's very important that at this age where there's an information overload on social media, that the employees know what is the right information. Bigyan kayo ng halimbawa, no? During the MECQ a few months ago, merong naglabas ng fake news that this certain area in where some of our employees are from had an outbreak of COVID-19. So pinost lang sa Facebook. And that really affected us because we had 10 employees who were not able to go to work. Bakit? Natakot sila lumabas ng bahay. Di ba? So if you don't give the right information or communicate the right information to your employees, then it also affects adversely your business. Also, in terms of proper safety and health protocols, you have to convince them that this is not just good for business, but importantly, good for them. If an outbreak happens in one of our factories or offices, then we would have to shut down for what, a week or two, and that would entail what? They will not be able to provide. We will not have any income. They will not be able to provide for their families. No production, no income, then no sweldo. Diba? Simple lang. So it's really about communicating that properly to them. And then outside communication, it's also important that our clients know that we are operating, we are okay, we can deliver you the goods, and we will be able to, because as I said, businesses are trying to look for some semblance of stability. So even our own clients would say na, baka naman pa nag-order kami sa iyo, hindi ka maka-deliver. Kung hindi kami maka-deliver on time, it disrupts their supply chain. It disrupts their whole production. So there's also a need for an effective communication to tell our clients na no, we are okay, we have the raw materials, we're producing, and we will be able to deliver on the time that you need it.
Okay, and I guess Mr. K. Harvey, there was a follow-up comment here that baka naman daw magkaroon ng infodemic or information overload. But I think what our panelists are saying, that when we talk about communication, it has to be stakeholder oriented, it has to be actionable, and it must promote stability with your stakeholders. Hindi lang to downloading type of information. And I think that was something that was demonstrated by Attorney Charlie, and the employees, how it was clear to the employees that they needed to be able to talk to their leader. Claro din kay Senator Bam. Senator Bam, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to share yung the two pilots we were doing with the Bright project in Marikina and in Palawan. Very different areas, very different situation. But one thing that was common across both areas, which again are worlds apart, very urban, very rural na mga lugar, is that they appreciated that when we began the project, tinanong namin sila, kumusta kayo? Anong tingin nyo yung nangyayari? Anong tingin nyo yung mga solusyon na pwede natin gawin together? Because when you talk about communication, hindi siya lang top-down. And unfortunately, these days, puro top-down tayo di ba?
Yeah.
Pero even and I'm not talking about cuddling, no? You're not cuddling your employees. No? What I'm saying is a genuine mechanism to communicate with them, with your constituents, no? And be able to find out what is really, how are they, and maybe some of these solutions come from them also, diba? But those two barangays, I just want to, since we're talking about communication, Jess, nagulat kami na in that process, one of the things that talagang na-appreciate nila was tinatanong sila, kumusta kayo at ano bang yung gagawin ninyo?
I was actually briefed
Yes.
by the result, and I'm having a meeting with the Bright team tomorrow. And I think that is one thing that needs to be clear. Kasi ang nangyari ngayon, yung communication is mostly top-down. And what Bright is doing is that it actually listens and empowers the barangay. And many of the leaders in Bright were saying we need to bring the power back to the barangay with this so much uncertainty, which is a very, very unique view in Kaya Natin and what we talked about yesterday.
And
No?
just transposing that effort na pang barangay to companies, mahalaga rin to listen to our employees, no? Mahalaga rin to listen to them kasi definitely na-appreciate nila if there is a clear source of information na malinaw, no? That was the other thing that came out of that Bright pilot na sa dami-dami ng information, having your leadership coming up, and Charlie talked about this, coming up with scientific, evidence-based, real information that's usable and practical, and hindi na nanakot. It's really just telling people how things are.
Kasi it's stabilizing the the situation. Even si Attorney Charlie, pati yung mental well-being
Yes.
taken care of.
And
Anyway,
then listening, and then also listening.
yes, we need to be able to move forward because I'm being poked by our organizers. Sa dami kasi ng question. And this is a good way probably to move towards an ending. It's not so much a question, but rather something that that affirms Attorney Charlie and also asks a question. We need more professionals in government, not allies in friends. We realize that people like Attorney Charlie, you constantly help government and communities from outside. How can professionals and unselfish people like Attorney Charlie you be convinced to join government? Mukhang merong biglang kabig doon, Attorney Charlie Yu. And I am convinced of his genuine integrity. Mukhang you were put in a position here, just like we were talking about earlier yesterday with VP Lenny. Go ahead, Attorney Charlie. As merong pahabol si JJ Soriano. Okay.
I think we're lucky enough to have people like Bam Aquino in government, very young, very idealistic, very capable, very intelligent person in government. And kami naman, we in the private sector, we will continue to support the good governance, no, and support projects of people who, who are to be emulated, like Senator Bam. No? So there are people in government. I think there are a lot of people in government who are very professional, who are very good. It's just that sometimes we tend to highlight the bad. But in the bureaucracy itself, you see a lot of very good professional people who work day in and day out. No? It's unfortunate that these unsung heroes are usually not recognized. No? So it's not as if there are no such people. There are a lot of very good people in government.
Okay, good. And just the way to end this, siguro, let's imagine that you were given the power to now be able to address the situation on SMEs and unemployment. And you're given one quick decision, one sentence only. How will you address and what will you prioritize? Quick answers. Parang kay Boy Abunda daw. Starting with Senator Bam.
Okay, quickest
Anong una mong
answer.
gagawin?
Do everything you can para hindi sila magsara. Whether this is cash or kung ano mang resources, just make sure that we stop the bleeding, stop companies from closing down, so we stop companies from laying off people.
Thank you very much, Senator Bam. Very powerful, very pointed. Mr. Harvey K?
Ako, do everything to stop the public health pandemic. Meaning, increase infinitely test, isolate, test, trace, and isolate. That's it. Parang at the end
addressing
of
the root cause.
You've seen Thailand, you've seen Vietnam, you've seen Taiwan. They were able to reopen their economies, and because of they were able to address this pandemic quickly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harvey K. Attorney Charlie Liu?
Dalawa lang siguro. Isa is think of ways and means to give subsidies. Second, think of ways and means to incentivize.
Okay, so very systemic and very strategic. And I think that is a good way to end and be able to give our listeners and viewers a profile of the cadre that Kaya Natin has, from a government leader to an enterprise and so civic leader, and also to a captain of an industry. We have this very, very varied view in how economy, and I think what happened here is we didn't just talk about business. We talked about not just good practices, but good perspectives as well in addressing both the changes and the root causes of the crisis that is brought about by COVID. We've run out of time. We have some more questions, and we would like to. Well, what we would do is we'd probably send this to our team and reach out to you. Sana po kung anonymous yung attendee, mailagay nyo yung email ninyo para sa ganun masagot kayo, and our resource panelists have a lot more to contribute and be able to reach out to you. But at the same time, I'd also like to congratulate again the Kaya Natin team for organizing this doses, part of the anniversary tribute of Kaya Natin, which shows that in Kaya Natin, the sanctuary, we talk about critical matters. In the next upcoming doses in September 2, it would be understanding the current Filipino situation and the effects of across the Philippines. So for those that want to attend, please register. Our team will post a lot the registration forms. And we would like to answer all the questions. If we are unable, there are still some questions coming in. If we are unable to answer them, we will try our best to do so. So once again, thank you very much to our resource panelists. Ang gaganda po ng sagot ninyo.
Thank you,
Siguro
Jess.
something,
Salamat,
oh,
Jess.
thank you, Atty.
Salamat.
Charlie. Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you.
Picture taking na lang. Pwede po ba before we end? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. And that ends our program. Maraming salamat po. Can we also recognize one of our strong partners? We are live at Inquirer. Hindi natin na-mention. Pasensya po. Thank you very much for magnifying the good news of Kaya Natin, good governance, and ethical leadership. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat.